My name is Dawn Brunke, and this is my animal communication breakthrough.
I'm really interested to know how you got started in animal communication, whether it was something that you were just kind of born with. I know we're all born with it, but were you able to do it from early on, or did you pick it up somewhere along the way?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think even from an early age, I was really interested in things like this. I didn't really know about animal communication, that it was a thing until probably about 20 years ago. And I was the editor of a health and wellness magazine here in Alaska, and I got an article from a woman who talked to animals. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. Um, I've always been interested kind of in extraordinary experiences or things that kind of go beyond our limits. But at the same time, I would say I'm a little bit of a closet skeptic. So I'm kind of like, testing things out. Anyway, long story short, I ended up talking to this woman, and I was very impressed with her. She was a very grounded individual, and she talked very matter-of-factly about talking with these animals. And she turned me on to a writer named J. Allen Boone, who wrote a wonderful little book back in the 1940s, 50s called Kinship with All Life. And I read that, and he was dead at this point, but he became kind of a mentor to me in spirit of just this very down-to-earth, wise presence, who was at the same time able to talk to his a dog that he lived with, a dog named Strongheart. Anyway, this was all kind of in the back of my mind, and I was a journalist, a writer, and I ended up doing a number of articles about animal communication. Ended up talking with a lot of communicators. Again, this was 20 years ago, so there weren't that many that I knew of. There were maybe, 2 dozen or so. But I ended up contacting these various communicators, and I realized I was really writing a book, not just magazine articles anymore. And I would always ask the people, the communicators, like, how does this work? How did you do this, right? And it never really occurred to me that or consciously anyway, that this was something I would do. I was really much more taking a journalistic approach, trying to figure out how it worked. How do you hear animals, and what would they tell you? I mean, to me, that was the huge fascination, is if you can talk to animals, what would they tell you about their lives and about the world? And so I was very deeply interested in the subject. And I would say after I interviewed probably maybe a dozen communicators, I was right here at my office, typing on my keyboard, and I was in a very calm, meditative state. You're a writer, so that kind of little trance state you get into, right? And everything's flowing, and you're very zen. And I happened to see from the corner of my eye a number of birds that came to the bush outside my window. It was just a little flickering. And this isn't something I would normally do, but again, I was kind of in that very calm state. I just put my hands on my heart, and I walked to the window, and I said, "Greetings, little birds." Even though it makes me laugh, because it's totally not something I would do. And yet it felt very genuine at the time, huh? And I heard the birds. I totally then understood what all these communicators were talking about. For me, it was a thought inside my head that was qualitatively different than my own thoughts. And the birds kind of sent me this little message of, we're here to support you and encourage you. And it was a very inspired type of little talk. And I remember the skeptic popping up and saying, "Well, how do you see the world?" That was my, how can I prove this to myself, right? And the birds said, "We see the world very quickly in beauty." And they kind of showed me almost a little movie in the back of my head of, these were small birds, and so very fluttery. And it was like this type of motion, a very fluttery motion of seeing the world, bursts of color and things like that. And then there may have been another question or two, but I remember my heart was beating so strongly because a part of me realized, wow, I'm doing this. And this is something that other people have done. I never expected to do it. It just kind of came up organically, and it was very real. In that moment, it was, there was no doubt in my mind that I was talking to these birds. the birds flittered away eventually, and I came back to my chair, and I thought, oh, I need to ground myself, huh? So I went to have lunch, and I kind of let it simmer on the back burner. And then the more logical part of me came up and started to, think about how did that happen? What was that? How exactly does it work? And I understood how all those communicators, had kind of a difficult time telling me how it did work, because it is something that's very, really, when it happens, very natural, and to me very organic. And it did make use, I think, of a part of my brain, or consciousness, in a different way than I was used to. And yet I knew deep down it was real. And that really, in terms of a breakthrough moment, that was it. It literally changed my world, because I knew that our consciousness was not the only one. The human consciousness is not the only one. There are, and you might know that intellectually, but when you experience it, it really is a mind blower, huh? So that was my opening. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
was it smooth sailing after that for you, or do you have some
um,
challenges?
yeah, I think that's something we all go through. Was it smooth sailing? No, there were there were waves, right? There were little, because this is something, again, 20 years ago, that was so not part of our culture, not part of the main culture, not something we did. It was probably very suspect for some people. Um, so there were times when I was like, is this real? What am I getting here? But I lived with, at the time, a number of dogs, and they were all really helpful. Because I think animals kind of know, once you have that, you're not necessarily broadcasting it, but you have an openness in a different way. So my dogs were a lot of times being there. I mean, my one dog, Barney, I would come through my office, and I would go up the stairs, and he'd just be sitting there, like, looking at me, right? And it was like a little test and a little challenge, a little nudge, of a warm, moist nose that's nudging you and saying, you can do this, right? And I think gradually what happened over the years is I had enough experiences of knowing things that I couldn't have known, in working with other people and working with other animals. And you get those little confirmations. And once I think you get enough of them, depending on how stubborn your skeptic is, it you start to be calmer with it. And so I became calmer with it and more accepting. And yeah, so it did smooth out, and now it is, relatively smooth sailing. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see taking your mind out of the picture can do wonders, because that's
Yeah.
really the block that most people go through, is they have that logical mind saying, I didn't hear it, I made it up, whatever,
Right.
so many
Right.
different things.
Right. We're working against ourselves then.
Yeah,
Yeah. So that's really what it is it's learning how to calm and learning how to accept
yeah,
and learning to trust yourself. I do some animal communication classes, and I think a lot of what I'm working with is getting people to trust and tune into and trust their own voice and their own kind of calm self, that small,
yeah.
still voice within, right? So you're attuning to that and listening in a different way. And it is hard to keep that rational mind quiet at times, for sure. Yeah.
So this led to what? Now you just said you're now a teacher. I know you've authored books on this. For how
Yeah,
long did that process?
I kind of divide my days between writing, books, and doing animal communication talks. I really enjoy doing that. I don't do a lot of that because I really want some writing time. That's kind of my, well, both of them. I love both of them, but I need both as a balance for myself, right? So yeah, so that's kind of
So
my
it
main.
all ended, the breakthrough ended up in a career doing this, not just the
It
writing
did.
portion. Yeah,
It did. Very unexpected. It wasn't ever something I thought I'd be or do, or yeah, it just evolved, snowballed. Yeah.
yeah. Well, we can all hope to have a breakthrough like yours, which was early on, rather than years of frustration of trying to do this and not being able to, and then finally having the breakthrough. That was sort of my story. Was
Mm,
frustrating at first and
mm.
for a while, and then finally. But yours is awesome. I would love to have yours.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing it with us, though.
Sure.
It's definitely going to be an inspiration because I think a lot of people think that these types of breakthroughs are more like what I went through, which is struggle, 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 finally breakthrough. And it doesn't always have to be that way. I know there's lots of people who never have to have any of these challenges. They can
Yeah.
speak to animals and hear them right away, or even when they're young,
Mhm.
or with you, which is great.
Yeah, well, and I do try to give back with that because I think when I do classes or even when I write, it's I try to um, inspire people to find what works for them. Because, I've never been kind of a fan of the one size fits all mentality. I think we all have different gifts in different ways. So sometimes when I do classes, it's presenting a buffet of different ways, a smorgasbord of different ways to do it, to tune in. You need to find what works for you. And and play on your strengths and practice. That's the other thing I think that people, we talked about this a little before we started taping, that it's our society in the West especially, we want things kind of right away, and we want the easy way, and it's not. I mean, even given my breakthrough, I would say I still needed to practice and train myself to be calm and to find that open space and to get those confirmations. And also, here's another thing: is to listen, kind of observe, listen to the part of you that resonates. Like when you're on, when you're on and you
Yeah,
got it,
yeah,
and then when you're off and you're
right.
not. And so when you're off, you need to just let it go, calm down, find that space of connection, and then it's
Yeah.
easier. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing today. We
Yes.
appreciate it.
You're
And we,
welcome.
yeah,
Nice talking with you.
all of your works and projects are an inspiration for everybody. So we
Oh,
thank you for that.
thanks, Josh.